Hey, Jordan, how's it going?
Hey, Rob, what's up?
Not much. I was just perusing the news, as we do, just channel surfing, flipping through the various, the MSNBC, CNN,
Yep.
kind of just doing the rounds.
Okay.
And seeing some really, what I think are frightening and disturbing news stories.
Well, there's been no shortage of those, but which one are you talking about?
Well, frankly, I'm seeing some reporting that that is claiming there are now some high-ranking people in the Democratic Party that are taking this moment to criticize the Biden administration and Joe Biden and suggest that he's not doing anything and he's not, meeting this moment in American history, with the kind of forcefulness that it demands. And it's really alarming stuff. I'm not used to seeing this kind of like radical left-wing sentiment being aired on this kind of mainstream media platform, especially from people in the Democratic Party. And I think it's really alarming to see this kind of really ugly, divisive rhetoric coming out at a time when Democrats and liberals need to be united. And I don't get it. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, I think it's really troubling. It wasn't like Democrats knew this was coming. I mean, they were totally blindsided by this. Or we didn't, know how this. We didn't have anything in writing about how the Supreme Court was going to act on this. It just out of left field, just one day, boom, Roe was gone. So you got to understand, like, they're scrambling. We should be united in this and keep your eyes on the prize. But these people who are criticizing them, these are like the radicals. Is that who you're talking about?
Oh yeah. Like really kind of these like hardcore extremists. I saw some really ugly comments by, Deborah Messing, for example.
Oh,
and
boy.
what I want to know about Deborah Messing is, what does Putin have on you? When did he get it? When did he get it? What kind of disinformation does it? What kind of compromat does he have that's making you flip like this at this moment?
Yeah.
Because that's the only possible reason that I could think. Listen, Jordan, it's not just about Roe v. Wade. It's not just about abortion rights. It's about the handling of the coronavirus pandemic. It's about the increasing likelihood of a drastic economic recession, the environmental crisis, the climate crisis, the seemingly constant, mass shootings and gun violence. And just because Joe Biden, quote unquote, hasn't done anything about these issues, regardless of that, I don't think it's a time to want to air this kind of dirty laundry and to go and kind of spread this kind of really ugly, divisive rhetoric. I don't think that's acceptable, regardless of
Totally.
that.
I think top down, it's been fantastic. On the day of the Dobbs decision, when we lost the protections enshrined in Roe, I looked to the Democrats for a calming presence, and what did I find? Congressman Andy Levin posting yoga pictures on Twitter. That soothed my soul
great.
like a balm. But more than that, like, what more do you want from these people? They are providing clips of Joe Biden talking about abortion that people can post on TikTok. If that's not action, I don't know what is. But more than that, like, think about it in the bigger picture. Joe Biden is committed to this. He said it from the get-go. And it's not like he's out there nominating anti-choice judges.
No.
Oh.
He's not, is he?
Wait a minute.
Oh, boy.
I think that's like the most absurd, one of the most absurd things that they've done probably in the past year. And like, just the fact that they were even considering this, and then we saw the story from CNN today that not only were they considering this in exchange for some shitty deal with Mitch McConnell, they were going to announce this guy's nomination the day of the Dobbs decision. And it's like, you could say, oh, well, they didn't know exactly what day. Because like in that story, someone in the White House was assuring them it wasn't going to come on that Friday. but there were only like 3 possible days left. What? First of all, why are you even considering it? And yes, it's absurd. I think everyone listening is probably in agreement. That is not even something you should consider as part of a deal. A lifetime appointment of an anti-choice judge in Kentucky. Just non-starter. But the fact that they were like, yeah, this week in general is going to be a good time to roll this out is just beyond me.
Good. Yeah. Well, you're saying you don't trust Mitch McConnell? Like this is what Biden must be getting all kinds of great return on this cutting this deal, right? What's he getting?
It's McConnell promises
they'll consider like voting for some of his like lower
not
court
even
nominees,
that. It's
possibly
they
or something.
promise they won't block any more of those nominees. Which like how many times has he said something and done something else? Like McConnell is a rat. His word means nothing, and it should mean nothing. If that's what you get in exchange, his promise that he'll do something.
Yeah. Well, it's been really stunning, I think, seeing the complete lack of response to this that we were kind of alluding to in the beginning there. And the amazing thing is, like we talked a few weeks ago when this Roe v. Wade decision leaked. And some of the speculation was like, well, perhaps this leaker, whoever it was, is some kind of, a Democrat or a liberal that wanted to signal that this was coming. So to give the administration time to like figure out a plan of action that they could bring to people in this moment, people that are very justifiably terrified about their rights being stripped away. And it's just like the amazing thing is that none of that happened. And we talked about the yoga poses. There was singing "God Bless America." There was Nancy Pelosi reading a poem from an Israeli poet. What else is there? There's and just like endless calls to just like you can vote and fix this.
Dude, soliciting donations to the DNC, to Pelosi's campaign, D-Trip, like to the party itself. At a time when, as our guest points out, we should be donating, not just donating, but making recurring donations to abortion funds. And I think I saw the total haul was like 80 million for the Democratic groups.
Yeah, that's the horrible thing is that this actually working. This like completely cynical, crass weaponization of this in order to continue to fundraise for the Democratic Party while they're sitting idly by and allowing this stuff to happen. That just works as well. So it's just like, what motivation do these people have to actually act and not continue just to fall back on this and use this as a fundraising scheme when it just keeps on delivering the goods for them?
Right. And they haven't laid out a plan or a path forward. And yes, I understand. What we need to do is codify this stuff. We need to fight it in the states. And ideally, there should be, federal law that guarantees a right to an abortion. And to do that, sure, you would need more Democrats. But it's very frustrating to hear, you need to vote for us and get out there and vote and support us and donate to us, when a couple weeks ago, they just had a House runoff in Texas where you had a progressive pro-choice woman against an anti-choice, a centrist corporate, basically a Republican, anti-choice man. And the top Democrats in the House all did get out the vote calls, campaigns, rallies for the anti-choice candidate, and he barely won by like 150 votes. So, and then immediately after that, they don't lay out anything going forward. Like, we don't know exactly what their plan is. Sure, Biden is now saying that we should make an exemption for the filibuster, but what if that doesn't happen? Then what? And it's frustrating that we had to basically beg for some sort of information or some sort of plan when you know what the right's plan is. They're already saying it. It's national ban. That's what we want next. So it's not unreasonable for people to question the get out and vote rhetoric, but you can't vote right now. Like, what are you going to do? And beyond that, you're still protecting people in your own party who are anti-choice. I'm blown away. My expectations were low, and somehow it was even worse than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, just even looking at like the Senate math of how this upcoming election is going to go, the idea that they're going to be picking up Senate seats like already is like extremely unlikely. And when they've failed to kind of deliver anything on their agenda, and so many people are alienated, like I was looking at Biden's polling numbers with young people, especially young people who are primarily affected by these kinds of abortion bans, completely underwater in terms of popularity with these younger demographics, explicitly because even though our friends in the like liberal consulting world don't seem to understand this, they can't wrap their minds around why this guy's so unpopular, when it's quite clear that when you promise people to like fight for them and fight for an agenda that's going to help them and then systematically abdicate the responsibility for any of the issues that this group cares about, lo and behold, they don't really enjoy that and appreciate that too much. And that's the result. This idea that they could codify abortion rights with just a few extra Senate seats, that's like, it's already kind of unlikely. Like the idea that they're going to get 10 Senate seats is basically an impossibility. It's really looking very bad for the Democratic Party. And like, I don't know if this is going to, like, if they're counting on this to be something that galvanizes people, it not only galvanizes them to donate to the party, but to go vote for it. It's a pretty dangerous game. And it's like, they're walking right into this situation where they're going to lose influence and lose whatever ability they may have had to try and reverse whatever damage has been done. Is going to be, the opportunity to do that is going to be completely just gone.
Yeah, absolutely. When we get into a little bit of that and a little bit of what you can do as a politically powerless person who listens to the show and cares about this issue, as you should, we get into that with our guest. But on the donating to abortion funds part, if you go to protectabortionrights.com, you can donate right now to the Texas Equal Access Fund. That's something my partner has set up, and already 20,000 plus has been raised to go to the Texas Equal Access Fund, which is an amazing life-saving group in Texas that helps people get out of state and get an abortion because they deserve it. They deserve that ability. And Texas, before the Dobbs decision, basically outlawed it. So protectabortionrights.com. It's amazing.
How did that the fundraiser go that you did?
I don't want to say I did it. She did it.
Yeah, sure.
My partner did it.
You can put it together. I was you, the royal you, the editorial. Yeah,
sure,
you were there.
Sure. Yes, of course. Usted in Spanish.
Yeah, exactly.
She's been raising money for weeks, and did a marathon live stream on Twitch over the weekend, and brought that total up to 20,000, which was just spectacular. So I think some of the listeners I saw in there were donating. A lot of the TYT community was in there donating. Really, really appreciate it because the money just goes straight to the group. So it was great. Fantastic. She did amazing work. And I don't think there's anything else from that stream that needs to be mentioned or was noteworthy or anything else. Okay. Really.
Because I heard that there was some like dancing and singing and stuff that was going on. Is there any truth to that, or is that?
I mean, she's a singer, so you know that. Right. That's probably what they were talking about. Maybe she just kind of moved her shoulders
and there was
around.
No one else there that was
not that I can
participating in that kind of. I see.
I want to know who fucking told you this, because I didn't see you there, so I want to know who told her this. I want to know who told you.
I've got my little birds. On my list. My little birds are always paying attention.
Guess in Lodane or Ice, because that's the crossover I know exists.
I'll never tell. My sources, the leakers.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll always protect the leakers.
Yeah, I to inspire. Look, for the fundraising, crowdfunding type stuff, I've done it for years, and it's effective. It gets people to donate. I will happily humiliate myself if it means people donate to a cause I care about. I have no issues with that. I don't take myself very seriously. So happy to just fucking degrade myself, whether it's, eating that spicy chip, which I've now done for charity like 4 times and it gets fucking worse every year, to getting a shitty, embarrassing, actually I won't say shitty, because the artist who is my tattoo artist is phenomenal and she does like all my other stuff and she's a great artist, so it's not a shitty tattoo. It is embarrassing that I have a fucking Fortnite tattoo on my body for the rest of my life, but we raised $25,000 for healthcare for the homeless in Baltimore. I'm fine with that. So to encourage people to donate, I agreed to fucking dance seductively on the stream in a wig to Careless Whisper for 6. And once we hit 16,000, and then once we hit 20,000, I did a duet with my partner. She's a singer. I mean, she went to fucking Berkeley. Like, she can sing. It's like, she's like legit. I didn't get into Berkeley. I did.
Right.
Knew it wasn't even worth applying. I can't sing well. And we did a duet of A Whole New World from Aladdin in costume after we hit 20,000.
Very
That
nice.
VOD doesn't exist. Don't even bother searching for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gone. It's been scrubbed.
Yeah, there's no
it.
video evidence because you had to be there to see it. But please, protectabortionrights.com. We set up the link to redirect right to the GoFundMe, Texas Equal Access Fund. It's a great organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really cool that you did that. It's as much as I enjoy turning the screws to you a little bit, really cool that you were able to do that, you and your partner. Congrats to you both. Let's bring on our guest, Kate Smith. Did you already introduce Kate Smith?
Not yet. We should do that.
Okay.
Though.
Let's introduce our guest, Kate Smith, who's going to be joining us in a few minutes. Do you want to just let everyone know? Yeah.
How long is this transition?
Okay. Well, I didn't know if you wanted to give a little intro.
Oh, yeah, we could do that. Kate is with Planned Parenthood Federation of America. She's great. She used to be a reporter, and this was her beat. Abortion was her beat at CBS News. So she understands the landscape nationally. She gives us some good historical context, the attacks in the states leading up to this, the judicial strategy that the right took to get to this moment, and lays out a path forward, what you can do, how you can take action beyond just voting for Democrats in November. What are real tangible things that you can do right now? And what are the attacks ahead? Because the right isn't going to give up. They're going to keep at this. So Kate lays out all of that. It's a fantastic conversation. We hope you'll stick around to the end.
Yes. Let's bring her on now. Kate Smith is going to be joining the program right after this.
We're joined by Kate Smith, who is Senior Director of News Content at Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Kate, now we start all of these conversations the same way, and I realize as I'm saying this how weird it is, especially for this episode on this topic, but we have to ask you because we ask everyone.
You're scaring me. You're scaring me.
Well, you should be scared. This is serious business.
Yeah.
Kate Smith, are you a gamer?
That is such a more innocuous question than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't. It's serious.
Yeah.
Wow. You know what? I have to say I didn't think I was going to go public with this today, but what the heck? I'll just admit it. Breaking news.
Okay.
I embarrassingly really like to play The Sims.
Okay.
Really?
Yes, and I realize that's like in the gamer world. I feel like nobody really considers that gaming, but
I think that counts. That's gaming for sure. Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I love to just kind of get lost for 2 hours in The Sims and just it's like a brain reset. Do you know what I mean? So yeah,
Definitely.
I guess yes.
Okay, so you are a gamer. Now,
I like
what
The
is
Sims
your
language. I always enjoy that when hearing them interact with one another. I'm not really. I don't really play it myself, but I like that though. That's cool.
It's so soothing, and I've seen a TikTok trend where they use an audio that sounds like The Sims talk, The Sims language, and it makes me very happy every time I hear it.
Now, what kind of Sims player are you? Are you a just a standard? Hey, this is my house. This is my family. Oh, this guy's going to work. Oh, this person's in love. Or are you, the normal kind, like pulling the ladder out of the pool, taking the doors off the walls?
I have been pulling the ladder off the pool since I was in 5th grade, okay? I am Professor Chaos when it comes to The Sims. But it's a little bit of both, okay? So chaos isn't fun when it's just a poorly laid out game. You have to really set these people up for absolute disaster. So I like to play it like a weirdo, actually oh, I gotta get the promotion, gotta pay my bills on time, and then you just wreak havoc on them. And so
Nice.
I'm a horrible person, I guess. This is how I relax. I have to say, I don't think I've actually I think the only person that knows I play The Sims is literally my husband. So this is a
Wow.
really big coming out moment for me.
Yeah.
It's great.
Kate Smith exposed. With the
Yeah.
Exactly,
all
exactly.
caps, the title.
Kate, you are here in addition to Gaming Talk to give us an overview of the past few weeks on abortion rights, or now in some states, the lack thereof because of the Supreme Court. But if you could give us a little bit of background for people who don't know how we got to this point. I think people understand, yes, the right has been attacking the right to choose in this country for decades. But I don't think some of them quite understood how that operated in this country. And there were two Supreme Court cases, Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that laid out these rights and the obstacles and restrictions that some states could impose on people. But now that is all gone because of the Dobbs case out of Mississippi. Could you give people a brief overview of what those were, what those did, and after these now successful attacks by the right, where we are now with this Dobbs case?
Yeah, I think the best way to understand where we are is to look to the past, right? So in 1973, you have Roe versus Wade, and it establishes that states are not allowed to ban abortion. It's kind of like a little bit of like the opposite of what you saw a couple weeks ago, right? And at the time, like some states had banned it, some hadn't, and then this pretty much just like laid it out and said states cannot ban this procedure. You have to have it available. What you saw after that, obviously, was a lot of like anti-abortion people went to restrict it in different ways. So it's like, okay, if I can't ban it, I'll do it. It can only be available, you know, by an OBGYN, or, there's a waiting period, or there's this or there's that. So like basically regulating it nearly out of reach for a lot of patients, which is what you saw with Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And that establishes that states can't place an undue burden on patients while they are trying to get an abortion, right? And so what that means in like kind of in a practical setting is that any law that a state would have had to pass for a patient to get an abortion, it has to pass this undue burden test. And it's, is this law outweighing the whatever like safety, and I'm using quotations with my fingers here, whatever safety reason the state has used to pass this law, that can't get in the way or be more important than the fact that someone can actually get the procedure itself. So kind of an example of some of the laws that get like caught up in that would be like the waiting periods, like I said. So like, for example, Missouri had a 72-hour waiting period. A court there found it wasn't an undue burden, but in other states, other courts did find that to be an undue burden. And kind of most famously, the undue burden test was a Supreme Court case, Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt in 2016. And that was whether it's really complicated, and like I think the answer is more important than the details. But to give you an example, it was about whether doctors who provide abortion had to have admitting privileges at local hospitals. Court struck that down, said it was an undue burden. And another thing is that, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, this undue burden test, and Roe v. Wade, the states can't ban abortion. These two cases had been reaffirmed many times over by the court. So, not only would these be just considered normal precedent, in kind of the legal world, they would be considered super precedent because they had been tested, they had withstood that test, and they had continued, right? Which is not the same for a lot of different Supreme Court precedents. That's a different kind of standard, and kind of what makes the Dobbs case so stunning, and the fact that they took this case so stunning. So taking another step back, states have been passing restrictions and bans on abortion ever since 1973. Okay, so this was like a 49-year long battle, and pretty much like throwing everything at the wall. So you saw, like I said, the admitting privileges law, you saw waiting periods, you saw what kind of medical professionals are allowed to perform the procedure. You saw restrictions on telemedicine, you saw gestational bans, obviously. So, 22 weeks, 20 weeks, 18 weeks. And then what kind of shifted things and what, presented a much more clear threat to Roe was when this kind of fringe idea of the quote heartbeat ban kind of came into the mainstream. Um, and that was around 2018. And then in the 2019 state legislative session is when it really, really picked up steam. And just to pause for an example, because just it's interesting to me, these, what these bans are is they ban abortion after a doctor can detect like kind of like fetal like cardiac activity, like just kind of like electricity, really. That typically happens around 6 to 8 weeks. And for a lot of people who are hearing this, like, yes, that is long before many, many people know that they're pregnant, especially if you're not
Yeah.
trying to get pregnant. That is absolutely before you probably know that you're pregnant. And this was a very fringe idea within the anti-abortion movement. They really didn't like it because to them it was extreme. And I'm not saying what abortion supporters believe. This is what anti-abortion people believe. They believed it was too extreme, too fringe, too strict. They really liked this kind of incremental work that they were doing rather than just going wholesale for these like pretty much total abortion bans when you're thinking kind of in practicality, right? And so in 2019, the table shifted. And of course, this is after Kavanaugh's appointment to the Supreme Court. You saw state legislatures being much more willing to consider these. And for really the first time, they were getting out of committee. They were going towards, full House votes, Senate votes, getting to the governor's desk. And I think it was about a half dozen, maybe 7 or 8, but quite a few states passed these. And that was a real turning moment for this anti-abortion movement because the first time you were really looking at something that was so directly attacking Roe. And all of these things do attack Roe. Like virtually any law that would restrict abortion before viability, which is around 24 weeks, let's say, any law that restricts abortion before that is considered in violation of Roe. But these were the first ones to be so extreme about it. And even 15 weeks, which was the Dobbs case, was considered one of those. And the reason why I bring all this up is because the case that you saw in front of the Supreme Court, oral arguments in December, decision a couple of weeks ago, it was not one singular case, right? This was like very, very much, a coordinated effort to just really like, I mean, I almost want to say this expression is probably inappropriate, but it's just like accuracy by volume. Like, I mean, it's literally was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bans just to try to make it through the judicial system to get in front of the Supreme Court. And obviously the one that did was this 15-week ban. And one thing that I think kind of got a little lost in the sauce because there were just like so many things to look at. This 15-week ban. So Mississippi passes it, obviously immediate TRO, restriction. They can't put it in place, obviously in violation of Roe. District court says absolutely not in violation of Roe. Goes to a circuit court. The circuit court, and actually, I would recommend anyone read this this decision because I found it really interesting from Judge Reeves. Was like, obviously this is against Roe and you are abusing the judicial system. Like this is like an affront to the American judicial system, the way you are trying to get what you want right now. So they were like completely called out. And then in the middle, seriously, like literally in the middle of the Amy Coney Barrett SCOTUS hearings, the Senate confirmation hearings, the AG of Mississippi lifts it back up to the Supreme Court and says, hey, not only do we want you to look at this, we also actually want to change the central question to be whether Roe is good law or not. And that's what was like so wild about this case is like, it was so gamified, if you will, right? And it was very clear that that was the one that could make it. That was the one that was closest to the Supreme Court. And then once you have a 6-3, it's much easier to approve a case, despite there being no ambiguity on a circuit court level about whether or not there was questions about Roe. There were none. And then obviously when the decision comes down, what it looks like, right? 6-3. So that's kind of like where I think it's like a maybe not brief, and I apologize, but that's kind of the history of how we got to June 24th. And the reason why I say all of it is because I think it's really important to note that like it wasn't this case. It was this case, but it wasn't this case. It was the momentum of hundreds of cases over the course of literally 49 years. So it's, it wasn't a singular thing. It wasn't a one-off thing. And if it wasn't Dobbs, you guys, it was going to be something else. So, and that's the reason why I say all of that.
You get kind of the sense that for people in the kind of liberal political establishment, they just, and this has been talked about endlessly over the last week or so, but there wasn't really a sense of urgency about this when it comes to protecting abortion rights. And you get the kind of sense that there's people in the political establishment that maybe didn't think that their opponents were really serious about going all the way with this, and kind of assumed that they were kind of cynically using abortion as a way to rile up their base, as a way to fundraise, and similarly to the way that they use protecting abortion rights to rile up their base and to fundraise. But it feels like there was a sense that they didn't really think that people on the right, these hardcore ideologues that have been doing this, were really serious about going all the way and really repealing abortion rights across the country. From someone I know, I feel like I know the answer to this, but just from someone that works kind of in that world, was that disconnect frustrating to you? Because obviously you know full well that the people on the right were very, very serious about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like for context, like I used to cover abortion policy at CBS for the network. And so I was like reading a lot of this legislation. And you know what? Like, I'll be the first to admit I had a terrible take back in 2020, which was that like, I think this is a bit of like dog catching the bus. Like, I think when push comes to shove, is like the Florida governor really going to pass a 15-week abortion ban? And at the time, I really believed the answer was no. So that's my bad take that didn't age very well, because that's the opposite of what you're seeing. You're seeing that these politicians were very serious about what they were doing. And I think like we're all like trying to absorb it. It is frustrating. I think to me, what the bigger frustrating thing was just like acknowledging that this was a real threat, right? Because like it got like it was thrown away so quickly by so many of the Democratic candidates for office, by, just politicians in general. Like, I'll give you an example. On the like 2020 presidential, like Democratic presidential candidacy process, like nobody had any answers for what to do about Roe. And like, in retrospect, that's insane, because at the time, you are like 2 years out from Roe getting straight up overturned. And when I was like talking to candidates and like reporting on this, there were no ideas. It was just like the kind of lame, I'm going to codify Roe. Like, okay, great. How? Like, what are you talking about? That's not like hardly in your power to do so. And then the only person, actually, the two candidates, the only two candidates that really had seemed to given it real thought was Senator Booker and Senator Harris, former Senator Harris. And they, former Senator Harris had this idea about, actually both of them did. It was kind of like almost like this Voter Rights Act style legislation, where you would, like, states that were hostile towards abortion would need to go some sort of like through DOJ pre-clearance test. Obviously that didn't happen. Obviously it would be incredibly difficult for them to actually implement that, given that they would need support from Congress to do that. But I think like that's what was frustrating to me. The frustrating thing, like knowing that you're seeing hundreds of state laws getting passed with the sole purpose of overturning Roe versus Wade, for the sole purpose of the moment that you see happened. And like nobody really cared. Like nobody had any ideas at that time. Like I think that was the really frustrating part to me. And like obviously it's frustrating to watch what's going on. It's more than frustrating. It's hard to even come up with words to really describe what I'm seeing. Like it's devastating, it's infuriating, but frustrating, I think I would use to describe like kind of the process by which we got here, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw over the past couple of years, as you talked about, these, surreptitious attempts to outright ban it. And sure, people were sounding the alarm, but it just felt like there was this collective disbelief from the broader left that it wouldn't result in an outright ban or overturn of Roe. Like Texas's SB 8 was essentially an outright ban. My partner lives in Texas. I haven't talked about this on the show before because I was waiting for her to talk about it first, but in January she needed to terminate a pregnancy. and she found out week 4. At the same time, she had COVID, so that also delayed her ability to even get care. And by the time she found out, which was like a couple days late, it was already basically impossible in Texas to get an abortion. So she had to travel to DC because it's much easier for her here to get it. And she got it, but like not everyone has access to that. Like we split the cost, and it wasn't cheap. But at least, like, she had a place to stay here, but other people don't have that. So these other states had these insane pre-Dobbs basically bans. Like, how else was she going to know? Like, unless she's just taking pregnancy tests week 1 and week 2, which is totally unreasonable.
You're exactly right. And I think, like, that's why I say frustrated, because, like, we already saw, like, where states wanted to go. Like, Texas has had a 6-week abortion ban in place for 9 to almost 10 months before Dobbs came to be, right? And like, so we know, like, we have all these answers. Like, we know that, like, if you are low income, or if you're part of like a historically marginalized community, like, these laws affect you in incredibly different ways. And it's just, that's like the frustrating part, is like there's no like speculation about what happens next. We already know. And that's, I think, too, it's like frustrating. Like, you hear a patient with a story like that, and like, even though like you had the means to be able to get it done, like, it's still a struggle. It's still not easy. Like, is that really like the best we can do for healthcare in one of the world's richest countries? That just doesn't sit right with me at all. It's such a problem. It's such an obvious problem. And I think, God, yeah, it's just such an obvious problem. And so like un-American. I think that's what I keep coming back to about these like abortion bans. Like, to me, and I this is probably naive of me. Look, like, I'm an upper middle class white woman. Like, my America is different than other people's America. But the idea that you're like regulating someone's healthcare like this, getting in the way of their opportunities, not letting them control your own body without the state being involved, like, that's just not American. I just, it's not American.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think some of these people are immune to pointing out their hypocrisy. That it doesn't seem to do anything, doesn't seem to accomplish anything. As blatant as it is, it's just in how in your face and completely outrageous it is. How they can simultaneously hold these two thoughts in their minds at the same time. It doesn't seem to have any impact when you point this out to them, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't. It's crazy. It's just like there's so much of the rhetoric is so obviously hypocritical, but yet it bounces off them. You're right. I don't know.
So on that point, though, people are going to need to travel out of state if they live in a state where they were subject to a trigger law, or these ongoing attempts by state legislatures to implement outright bans in their states. And I was wondering if you could give people an overview of what happened immediately after Dobbs on that trigger row front, and what you're seeing from these bizarre state legislators trying now to also, I don't know if this will hold up, but also try to block people from even leaving the state to get care, which, to your point, is just so bizarre that they would outlaw leaving the state. And this ultimately sends things underground, because if people need care, they're going to find it. The result is going to be people are going to experience much more unsafe situations. But what have you seen? So I guess what happened after Dobbs with these trigger laws, and where does it go from here in some of these state legislatures?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, like I said, these state legislatures were preparing for preparing is like the understatement of the year. They had been an immense amount of preparation for that Friday decision, right? There were about 13 states with trigger laws. And for those of you who don't know, trigger laws are these laws that basically they acknowledge that Roe was good law, and the law's language is like, but if Roe ever gets overturned, this law immediately goes into effect. So there were 13 states with those in the books. And right now, as of, it's Wednesday night, there are 11 states that have abortion bans in effect, and these range from all-out abortion bans to 15-week abortion bans, but all have bans in place that prior to Roe versus Wade would absolutely not be allowed to be in place, of course. I say that, but Texas SB 8. So in theory, what you are also seeing though is that people like Planned Parenthood, ACLU, Center for Reproductive Rights, they are all an immense litigation campaign to really fight each and every single one of these bans. It becomes a 50-state battle for every single state. And what's interesting is that it's not a one size fits all. It's not just like, oh, well, let's get the boilerplate 6-week abortion ban litigation. Like, it's not like that. It's actually much more complex than that. Major caveat here, I am not an attorney. So there are people who are smarter than I am that can really get into the weeds on this, but the baseline level is that it's really a lot of these battles are being fought with like state constitutions. And so, some of the legal defenses are, well, yes, Roe is overturned, but your state constitution would, in theory, guarantee the right to an abortion, even if you want to ban it. Like, it might not be U.S. constitutional, but is unconstitutional in your particular state for your state constitution. So that's like one of the ways that people are, looking at it. But the reality is you're right. There are just going to be durable bans in place that there are some patients will not be able to overcome. There will be patients who will be pregnant against their will and give birth against their will. Because of these bans. But I do want to push back on one thing you said. It's unfair to compare pre-Roe illegal abortion landscape to what it is today. And the reason being is because of medication abortion. So medication abortion, it works up until kind of depending on things, but in the early parts of your pregnancy, and it's very, very, very safe, incredibly safe. And we didn't have access to that before Roe. And so I do want to push back that it's like necessarily dangerous for people to do this. The reason being is because we don't want to further stigmatize abortion, right? Like, we got to this place because of all this abortion stigma that exists out there. So the reality is that there will be a lot of self-managed abortion using abortion pills by mail. But the reality is that people are going to be doing that in the absence of a choice, whether they wanted a surgical abortion or not, right? So I think one of the things that we're trying to really hard to do is like, we don't want to call it like underground abortion. It's like, it's medication abortion, it's self-managed abortion, it's largely really safe, but you have to like create the education about it and tell people how they can do this, and what it looks like, how they can get it, what their state laws like. And that's like a big front of the battle moving forward as well.
I wanted to allude to something you were kind of talking about earlier when you talk about the ways that the right has been organizing this for decades, because I think there's been this kind of effort in the wake of this decision to kind of promote this idea that you can accomplish things through this kind of incremental progress and just by voting for the right parties. And look what the right did. They kept voting for the people that said that they wanted to support this project for years and years. And they accepted this kind of incremental progress to get to the point that they got until they got the thing that they wanted. And I think that really like undersells the massive kind of right-wing machine that has been built to bring about this decision. It wasn't just a matter of people voting for politicians, but there's this massive infrastructure in place in the media, in the political world, churning out judges that are going to have the right rulings on things, promoting anti-choice or pro-forced birth candidates. I think this idea, like, it's a really trite takeaway that, like, well, the best way to push back on something like this horrible thing, is just to organize and to vote and to keep voting for the right people that are going to do the right things. I think that really undersells this massive machine that was built, highly well funded, highly well coordinated, and well organized, that has been working overtime for now years and years and years to get to this point. That's not something that can just be fixed by going and pulling the lever for someone that says they're going to do the right thing,
I completely agree with you. I mean, look, everyone should vote. Voting is incredibly important, and it's what gets you to the friction points where you can make a difference. Absolutely. Full stop. But it took a lot more than voting to overturn Roe versus Wade, and you're absolutely right. Like, and I don't want to scare people, but it took half of a century to overturn Roe versus Wade, and that was a coordinated fight with groups who it was their entire focus was just to do this one thing. And they did it, but it took 50, almost 50 years, right? And so I think like one thing that I'm like really trying to like brace people for is that like you're in this fight for the long haul. You are not like we got pushed out of the Constitution. You don't get put back in the Constitution overnight or in a couple months. That is a multi-year commitment. And like the stories that we're hearing, it is absolutely a fight that is worth pursuing for as long as it takes to get you back in the Constitution, to get the power over your body back. Like, I can't think of something that's more important than like power and control over your own body. But I do think we need to like level set with the base and with, our supporters and be like, hey, come to the protest, make your voice heard. Don't lose sight of this battle, but buckle up because it ain't gonna fix itself in a couple months. This is a long-term fight. And I say that for two reasons. First, like level set your expectations, but also like it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Like, brace yourself. It's an emotionally really hard work to do this work, to be out in this fight, to be talking to people about this, and do it at the pace that you can handle, because for you to make a difference, you need to be doing it for a long time.
So what would you recommend if someone asks you, okay, I'm frustrated, I obviously can't vote right now because it's not an election. What do I do? How do I help people in need? How do I help people who need care? How do I contribute toward this marathon? What can I do as an average person without any political power to fight back?
So there's like some monetary answers to that and some like movement answers to that. I'll go through the monetary ones quickly because they're really straightforward. So first of all, if you can, donating to an abortion fund, especially like in a recurring way, so like $5 a month, like abortion fund of your choice gets $5. That will be immensely actionable and useful. So abortion funds, your partner, Jordan, if you didn't have the resources to be able to travel out of state, they would have been able to call an abortion fund to help them do that, right? So they do everything from travel to the procedure cost itself, which I don't know if you guys know this, but it's like abortions are kind of expensive. Like the cheapest it gets is $500, assuming it's not covered by your insurance. And let's face it, if you live in a state that's banned abortion, chances are the state's also gone after insurance coverage of abortion, right? So it starts at $500. It only gets more expensive from there. So these abortion funds will pay for that. They'll, do your lodging. They will handle child care costs. Like the average abortion patient is already a mother, so you have to think about child care costs. So that really makes a difference. And when we talk about the longevity of this fight, rage giving, amazing. Obviously, it's incredible and it helps people immediately. But if you're still giving in 12 months from now, that's what will really make the difference for the like individual patients who need access to the procedure. And then obviously independent clinics, your local Planned Parenthood clinics, like we talk about how we expect 26 states to ban abortion in some way, shape, or form. But the way I like to think about it is like, from a logistics standpoint, is that means that 24 states are absorbing 26 states' patients. And that is not an easy thing to do from just like an operational standpoint. Take abortion out of it. That's just a very, very difficult thing to do. So if you can get involved in a monetary way, in a recurring way, that's super helpful. If there's a way for you to volunteer, that's really helpful. So those are kind of the things that you can do like immediately, helps patients. But from a movement perspective, this is kind of a lame answer, so let me explain. Protesting is really, really valuable. And here's why. For abortion specifically, for everything, it's great. Like, use your voice. It's amazing. It's a right that you have. But for abortion specifically, there's this weird thing that happens, which is that it has been taught to us that it's this like, the debate of our generation, like, divisive, like splits America. Fact is, it does not. It does not split America. 8 in 10 Americans want abortion to be legal in some capacity, right? Only 9% of Americans believe that their state should fully ban abortion. And guess what? States are doing exactly that. Like Oklahoma right now bans abortion at fertilization. Okay. Like no one wants that, literally. And the polling backs me up. Don't believe me, like Kate Smith, Planned Parenthood. Just nonpartisan polling tells you that. And to me, I think it's because people don't like to talk about abortion, right? Like it makes them uncomfortable. They don't like it. I mean, oh my God, like it happens from sex sometimes. Like, like no one likes to talk about sex. Everyone's very conservative. So there's so many reasons why people don't like to talk about abortion. And I think what happens is in that void, it ends up having the appearance of like the polling appearance of something that it is not, which is, this, issue that's 50-50 down the road. And why I think protesting is so valuable is it because it helps dismantle that fallacy. It helps, if someone supports abortion rights, but they're like, oh, well, I'm probably in the minority of my community. When they see that protest happening, when they see people using their voices, maybe it's not even in a physical way. Maybe it's in like, you post something on your Instagram story, which I know is performative, but it's something. It helps that person who thinks that they're in the minority realize that they are not. And I think when we're talking about this marathon and all these things that are going to need to happen to get us back to a better place, right? Because we've talked about how even with Roe in place, it didn't work for a lot of people. So how do we get back to that place? I think the first step is making it so unbelievably obvious what the real polling is, where people really feel about this. And something that I never hear people talk about, but I think is like wildly important. Like the largest professional organization for obstetricians and gynecologists believe in the right to abortion, believe in legal abortion. So does the American Medical Association. Like, let's listen to our doctors. Let's listen to the people who actually have spent so much of their career to be able to answer this question. And then in the absence of that, let's listen to like the actual polling, what people want. And so my long-winded way of saying that is, when you see these protests, join one. When you see an opportunity to like maybe like share a post on Instagram, like share it. Because I think the biggest thing we can do right now is let people know that we're in the majority. What happened is something that the minority wants, but the minority was just more vocal than we were, right? Like that's all you can say. So use your voice. And it's not empty. It's important. And one thing that we're doing is trying to encourage people to like tell their abortion stories. Like, there's so many for so long abortion, and it's getting a lot better. So I don't want to like dismiss the work of some great artists, but like for so long, abortion in the media was like, it was like so inaccurate, like about like who we knew the average abortion patient was. We knew that they were in their 20s. We knew that they were, already had a kid. But yet every time you'd see abortion in like a movie or TV show, it's always like, the 16-year-old like cutting school to go to the Planned Parenthood for their best friend, right? Even though like that's actually like a very small percentage of abortions that happen. So all that to say is like sharing your abortion stories, like normalizing this, getting rid of the stigma is incredibly powerful as well. So, in the, to the extent that people are comfortable doing that, that really moves the needle. It's not empty. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and this is something that came up the last time we were speaking about this as well, is that I think that there's people in politics and media, even people that would kind of claim that they're pro-choice or have pro-choice records, but I think who have contributed to the stigmatization of abortion through the language that they choose to use about it. And I think that is one thing that it's important that people start to recognize in the ways that language can contribute to this stigmatization, and suggest that it is some kind of shameful thing that we should be embarrassed or find it impossible to talk about.
You're totally right. And I think like one piece that is so important is that I feel like so many people who support abortion rights, and especially like in a public way, so like a politician or even sometimes like activist groups, they take the playbook from the right and they work from there. I think we should throw the entire playbook out. Like to your point, like the right has told us this is like a shameful, terrible thing. Well, guess what? It's not. I don't care. Like, it's just
Yeah.
not. It's healthcare. The right has told us that this is something that should be regulated by by politics, so we should pass laws about it. No, it's healthcare. Listen to a doctor. Like, it just full stop, end of the sentence. And I think like there are a lot of different examples where the right has, really authored the playbook about how we talk about abortion, how we talk about reproductive health. And now is the time we need to rewrite the rules. And to your point, like, it's not good enough to just support it. You need to support it and also dismantle the the infrastructure that the right has built that got us to this point. And a lot of it is language.
I was also wondering what you think of something really kind of alarming and sinister is going on as well at the same time. We've been covering this on the show as it progresses, but not only is there this relentless assault on abortion rights and women's rights as well, there's also a relentless kind of assault on transgender rights as well, which is now growing in scope to include like all people in the LGBTQIA community. And the really weird thing about this is that this assault is coming from the same people. It's these social conservative, evangelical reactionaries. These are the ones that are engaging in these campaigns, trying to strip away rights from women, trying to strip away rights from transgender people, or other marginalized groups. And at the same time, there's kind of this meme taking hold where there's this certain line of thinking. This was exemplified in that New York Times piece that came out the other day about how, while the right is assaulting abortion rights, the left is also contributing to that by trying to have more gender neutral language, or like trying to show support to trans women, or suggest that transgender men or non-binary people also need abortions as well, and kind of trying to conflate these two things as if the people that are advocating for transgender rights are more gender inclusive language, and these like social conservative evangelicals that are stripping away people's rights are somehow both contributing to this, and avoiding the very obvious thing, which is that transgender and other LGBTQI people and women are both under assault by the same people, and conflating that or suggesting that trans people have somehow contributed to this is a really kind of dangerous and a way of framing this, right? And I don't think it has any basis in reality.
Oh, it has no basis in reality. And I think it's the same as what I was saying. It's like rather than questioning the playbook that the right is giving us, we're just doing it, right? I mean, the right has been always very successful in splintering apart the left, right? And trying to put each person in their silo. And the reality is that all of these things are very intersectional. And you can't have one person can't be free if we all aren't. And if you can't have autonomy over your body if your neighbor doesn't. Everyone has to have autonomy over their body. So all of these issues are so intertwined. And you're right, like the idea that the people who are championing bodily autonomy are somehow contributing to, anti-trans legislation is absurd. No, the people who are contributing to anti-trans legislation are the people who are writing it and championing it. Like that's, it's not the same thing. But I mean, one thing, an anecdote that I think is really powerful here is that when I was at CBS, and I was seeing these laws and it was specifically with trigger laws. I really wanted to cover them. I thought they were really interesting. This is 2019. And I remember telling like my editor at the time, and it was like, these are crazy. Like, this is very real. Like, if Roe versus Wade gets overturned, like the landscape happens like very, very quickly. And I'm seeing all these laws. Like, I think Roe is like really on the chopping block. We really need to like, amp this up. And everyone was like they thought there was no way, it wasn't happening in their brain. There was no way they could wrap their head around the idea that Roe versus Wade could actually get overturned in their lifetime, let alone in the next few years. It was just a total surprise. And I say that because what was happening concurrently was that the exact same process by which Roe versus Wade got overturned, an unrelenting wave of state legislation that was largely ignored by national media. The same thing is happening for for trans issues, for marriage equality. The same thing is happening. Bills get put forward every year, trying to dismantle marriage equality. We're seeing so many of like the trans bills happening now, and I'm very happy to see them getting coverage, because coverage is like step one, right? But it's already happening. And so I think like when we're thinking about these things, I think we did ourselves a really big disservice by kind of turning the other way when people said, hey, I think Roe is on the chopping block. We need to pay attention. We made a mistake by not, and I don't mean we, Planned Parenthood didn't know what was happening. I mean like the media and like, other areas. But we can't afford to do that again. Because, it's fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right?
Well, I believe I won't get fooled again.
I hope so.
Well, Kate, is there anything else you wanted to add? We really appreciate you joining us, explaining all of this, coming out as a gamer. I think this is a really critical conversation, and especially the gaming part.
Yeah. There's one piece in that I do really think contributed to where we are today, and I'm not seeing people fix it, which makes me very, very nervous. And I think like one of the ways, the reason why this whole thing got as far as it did, why Dobbs even got to the Supreme Court to begin with, was because a lot of the way in which we talk about abortion, the way it gets covered in media, right? It's often covered from, it's a local story. Like these are inherently like local news stories. Texas passes a state law about a healthcare procedure. That's a decidedly local news story. So maybe they get picked up in the local media, maybe they don't. And if they ever get picked up in national media, it's never patient focused. It's never logistics focused. It's always very like political focused, which I understand why, but it doesn't really like serve patients, and it doesn't really it doesn't speak to the larger movement of what was happening. So I think so much, even though it was this 49-year, well-coordinated, well-funded battle, it did largely go under the radar for the most part. And I'm kind of seeing that continue to happen, which makes me very, very nervous. So I think like when I'm thinking about what a post-Roe world looks like, I really want to make sure that we're not losing, as we're talking about the strategies and as we're talking about what this means for midterms, what does this mean for, 2024 presidential, we're not missing the forest through the trees, and about like what this movement is, how large this movement is, because the reality is this movement hasn't ended for the anti-abortion groups, right? Like this is the beginning. When I was talking to anti-abortion people as a reporter, they never thought Roe is the end. Roe is just opening the door to where they want to go. So I think like I'm really going to be paying attention to like how are we talking about what happens next, and making sure we don't make the same mistake again, because you don't want to wake up and there's a federal 6-week abortion ban in place and be asking yourself the same question of how did we get here? So that's something I'm thinking about a lot as we move forward.
We really appreciate it. This is a lot of helpful context and information. Where can people find and follow you and your work? And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at by Kate Smith, and I also have been trying to use Instagram to share things and videos. There's like a lot more like video content, but unfortunately, my Instagram is a relic of my personal life, so the handle for that one is La Kate. So if you follow me there, you're on the inner circle, and we're immediately friends.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to The Insurgents. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can find us on iTunes or Spotify or at Substack, theinsurgents.substack.com. You'll get the latest episodes delivered straight to your inbox, as well as our newsletter. On Twitter, we are at InsurgentsPod. Tweet at us, harass Ken in our replies, and then send us your hate mail to theinsurgentspod@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening.